of the next hour or so. But I think, Alison, we're very grateful to you for coming back to us this afternoon, because I think, the first event we had really threw up some interesting discussions, particularly around the Black Lives Matters movement and some of the things that come out of there. But from recollection, I don't think you'd yet taken on your new role at that stage. I think you were nominee, and now you are in position. And I think now I think it's a really good time for us here in Kirklees to kind of come back to you to hear about your thoughts after, I think, what you've been in there for 3, maybe 4 months. You're emerging.
Yeah, nearly 6. Yeah.
Nearly 6. All right, gosh.
Nearly, because even though I wasn't in post, I was doing things. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nearly 6, and so I guess, yeah, interesting in your emerging thoughts, and I think David has shared with you a number of questions that we had from our perspective.
I've had nothing.
No, you've had nothing. Okay.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to have to be very agile now, David, and come up with our list of questions.
I have the list, and I think John. Well, the main list provider was Jonathan Stevens, so it's just like a wicker scrum down, I think, this afternoon. But we're also Helena's colleague Susan Maycock, myself, and Jessica had also put our heads together because we'd like to do some work on hate crime, and just to get a feel from you, Alison, on wider regional initiatives in that area. We're looking towards also trying to do some work with the Bradford Hate Crime Alliance under the chair of Charles Dakers, who is Jessica has worked with previously. She used to work at the Students' Union in Bradford. So we're hoping to raise the profile here. Just one of the things we're looking at is to create a more open reporting and support network using things like leisure centres and libraries, as opposed to just going in and reporting. People will be in there, they'll be able to help with reports, they'll be able to help with further references and signposting for further services, and that's something that Helen and Susan are looking at the moment. So those are kind of the areas that we've had so far, and Jonathan is really talking. I think you've actually just touched on it. You were doing it in the first conversation. You were talking about EDI from a West Yorkshire perspective and what can WICA do. So those are a brief overview of what you should have received, and I apologise that you didn't.
I've been looking at it thinking, am I speaking? What am I doing? Why am I coming in here? What do you want? But it's fine. I'm flexible. It's fine.
Thank you very much.
So now you know, Alison. So now I think it's yes. So that's the 3 questions. And then if I could just be cheeky and add a 4th, because I think my understanding is today is International Disability Awareness Day, and so I think if maybe there are any things from your perspective, and particularly around policing, that touch upon that, then I think today would be an appropriate day perhaps to share those as well. So if that's okay to hand on to you, and hopefully all things that you're happy to speak to, and can I encourage others, if you've got questions, perhaps to put them into the chat as well, and we can pick those up with Alison once she's shared her opening thoughts. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Hugh. Yes, so thank you for asking me to speak today, and yeah, it's been a very interesting 6 months. I've been properly in role for about 3 months, but obviously been learning from day one. For those of you who don't know, my role is Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and that means that the Mayor delegates to me about 95% of the old PCC role. So in legal terms, the Mayor is the PCC, although she's called the Mayor and not the PCC, and she can delegate everything to me except for 3 things, and they are setting the precept, writing the police and crime plan, although technically I am writing it with a team of people, but it's the Mayor's plan and we're doing it on her behalf, and she will be presenting it. And then thirdly, it's hiring and firing the Chief Constable. So those are the 3 statutory functions that I am not allowed to undertake as part of the delegated functions. But everything else that I do, and the main thrust of the role, is holding the police constable to account for the delivery of an effective and efficient police force, to ensure that the priorities of our communities are reflected in that accountability framework that I am designing with the force, so that the things that we care about in our communities, that they're reflected. Obviously, the development of the police and crime plan and the setting of the preceptor are key responsibilities of the PCC function. And then we've got this thing called the SPR, which is the it's a national role, and it's about it's called the Strategic Policing Requirement, and it's about making sure that West Yorkshire can go help other forces nationally and internationally for things like the UN Convention, or I think that we've just had the we've just had lots of stuff up in Glasgow where our police also went to support. So, in a nutshell, those are the responsibilities, and I hold the police chief constable to account in a variety of ways, and they're normally through meetings called the bilateral. So it's me and him and a cast of thousands. I have to say, we're never on our own, very rarely in any event. We have the community outcomes meeting, which is live streamed, and the next one's going to be in a couple of weeks' time. And then we also have the delivery quarterly meeting, and the delivery quarterly is all about the data, and it's all about understanding how we're performing against the national data set, because police have a national data set that they have to perform against, and that's a thing around things like murders, for example, but also against the local police plan. And because we haven't got a local police plan, they're still reporting against Mark Burns-Williamson's old plan. And then the other thing that we do, obviously, is we ask lots of questions, ask for data to understand how policing is working. And then I've got access to a whole range of other information. So, for example, there is a DEI gold group that the police run, a diversity, inclusion, equality and inclusion gold group that the police run, which I have asked to attend so that I can understand the kinds of things that they're discussing, but also so that I can hold them to account for the fact that in West Yorkshire, according to the latest data, which I've read this morning, we're less than 7% of our police force and staff is black, minority, ethnic. And we're currently getting funded by government, this thing called the Police Uplift Programme, PUP, and I think it is a bit of a pop, really, if I'm honest. But the purpose of that money is to bring in 835 more officers over a 3-year period, which we are doing, but to ensure that the majority of those officers accelerate the representation of the force, not just for BME people, but also for women. And the progress actually in West Yorkshire against the 835 is good. So we're actually there's 4 tiers, 1 which is the best and 4 which is the worst. So our baseline for BME staff and officers is 4, which is the worst. But our rate of progress in relation to recent recruits is 1, because actually we're overperforming against our most similar force. And for women, our baseline for women is 3, and the rate of progress is 2. So it's slightly better than most similar force, but it's not substantially better, which is the case for BME officers. So these are the sorts of things that I'm asking. That's the sort of data that we collect. But also my role is very much about setting the culture and understanding from the Chief Constable how he sets his culture and what are the key values that he's bringing to his role, and things like hate crime, which I'll touch on in a moment, but most importantly, things like equality, diversity and inclusion are major foci of the conversations that we have together. And I really am quite passionate alongside the Mayor in pushing the women and girls agenda, the EDI agenda and the early intervention and prevention agenda, all of which are golden threads in the new police and crime plan. The police and crime plan is very, very close to being given to the police and crime panel on the 17th of December in its final draft stage. And what we're hoping is that they sign off the direction of travel. We've had thousands and thousands of people responded to the consultation, which is brilliant. It's the biggest consultation we've ever undertaken in West Yorkshire. The staff have said that it's unbelievable how much people have really engaged with it, groups have engaged with it, and so we're expecting to get a document that is a plan that people can engage with and people can feel speaks to them and their priorities. And that's then the document that we will hold the police to account to. But already, I'm really happy to say that the conversations that we're having with police are bearing dividends. So you'll have seen yesterday or the day before that the police are now recording misogyny and misandry, which they were not doing before. But because of the passion that we bring, the challenge that we bring, policing are understanding that as good as they are, and they've just got the best appeal inspection report in the country, it is the best in the country. I've spoken to HMIC, the inspector, who has told us that nobody else has got as good a report as West Yorkshire. We've got 4 outstandings, 4 goods and 2 adequates. The next best is 2 outstandings and various goods and inadequate. So we are substantially better than any other force in the country, which is great because it means that there is a whole range of stuff we don't have to talk about because we know where we're really making progress. But the areas that we're least good at is the EDI stuff, is the representation of the communities that we serve, is the race disparities, the disproportionality of things like stop and search. We know that nationally you're more likely to be stopped and searched if you're a black person, 7 times more likely. And in West Yorkshire, current data is about 4 times more likely. So we need to understand and get to the bottom of what this data is telling us. And one of the ways that I've been able to bring influence to that discussion is I've convinced the Chief Constable to bring a briefing paper to the Police and Crime Panel that describes all the disproportionality in relation to things like stop and search, taser use, use of force, use of handcuffs, all those things which the police have never talked about. They're going to have a private session with the Police and Crime Panel in January, and then most significantly they're going to publish their paper on disproportionality and race disparities on their website. Unheard of, this has never happened before, but this is because of the pressure that we are applying to policing and the expectation that if you are transparent and recognise the problem, not like the Commissioner in the Met who says there's no such thing in the Met as institutional racism, what a load of bollocks. We are saying in West Yorkshire, we want to face our demons, we want to understand the issues, and then let's start to address them. So look on the police website from April, because they're assuring me that they will start to publish this data. But also I've said, let's get an action plan about how you're going to address these disparities, because that's what people are interested in. People know that things are bad. Black people definitely know that things are bad. What we want to know is what you're doing about it. So going back to hate crime, data up to March 2021 tells us that once again hate crime has gone up nationally. It's gone up about 8% nationally, but with about 105,000 reported cases, and we know many cases are never reported. And in West Yorkshire, it was just over 9,000 hate crimes were recorded, which is up 12% on the previous reporting period. One good thing about West Yorkshire is that our recording is also outstanding. So out of all the similar forces, and that means forces of a similar size, so the Met, West Midlands, GMP, where in that group of families, there's another one, but I can't remember which one it is, and we are all classed as the most similar group, and we are the only one of those most similar group who have got outstanding for recording. So if you ring the police and tell them that there's a crime, they will record that, and many other forces don't. So just to say as a caveat, that's why often West Yorkshire looks like we're the worst performing, because we have the worst recorded crime and the lowest recorded conviction rates. Let's talk about CPS a bit later on, but that's because we are outstanding at recording. We record everything. But hate crime in West Yorkshire is going up, even though we know that not everyone is reporting. And the biggest hate crime is and has always been race. 72% in West Yorkshire of all hate crime is race hate crime. But for the 4th year running, disability hate crime is the biggest increasing hate crime that is being reported. And I recently attended a session with United Response with a group of service users to talk about the issues that were affecting them, and they fed into the Police and Crime Panel through that conversation that I had with them, which was brilliant. And of course, as part of our consultation We have got the consultation document in a variety of different formats, including easy read, which has never been done by any police and crime commissioner ever. So that was a great success, that we were able to be more inclusive of people with learning disabilities, and for whom easy read was the most accessible format. So there's lots to do in West Yorkshire, not just on the recording, but on the encouraging people to report, because we need more people to tell us about the things that are going wrong in their communities, about crimes that are happening to them, and that's about trust and confidence. And I was recently at a conference talking about confidence and consent, and I reminded the police chief constables in the room, and there were many, about David Olawale 50 years ago, about Daly and Atkinson 15 months ago, and I reminded that these chief constables, there have been many black people in between murdered, or who the police had been responsible for the deaths of, let's put it that way, because there'd been contact either in custody or just following contact with police, that lots and lots of people had died. And this is at the heart of our mistrust as a community, especially as a Black African Caribbean community. This is at the heart of our mistrust, our lived experience of stop and search, our lived experience of taser use, of direct and indirect racism. Our lived experience tells us that policing is not fair, but also the evidence speaks for itself. So, as I said, stop and search 7 times more likely. But even when you look at the overrepresentation of prisoners, so young people, I think they make up 12.5% of the population. Black young people make up 12.5% of the UK population, but they represent nearly 28% of the prison population. So massive disparities, and the lots and lots of evidence that's been collected that proves that the system is not fair, and that is where the lack of the hounding of David Olawale, absolutely, that is why black people don't trust policing, and the only way we're going to change that is by increasing the number of black people in policing and beginning to have a different conversation with the communities we serve, because black people are not part of the problem. We are massively part of the solution, and we want to have a different conversation with policing. We want to be safe in our communities. We don't want our men and boys, which is according to the data, who are imprisoned, who are stabbed, who are criminalised by a system that is unfair and unjust. So I will leave it there, because I could talk forever on legitimacy, which is one of the 4 areas of the Peel report. There's lots for us to do in West Yorkshire, and that's where my focus is. But it's also about making sure that the policing that takes place is inclusive of all communities, recognises vulnerability at the heart, and make sure that police are trained to recognise vulnerable victims and act in accordance with that. So I'm really happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant, thank you, Alison. That was as insightful and focused as ever. And in just 3 months, I think you've really managed to get a fantastic grasp of your brief, which is, really excellent and not at all surprising from my experience and knowledge of you from over a decade of working together on various things. So thank you. I think that's a fantastic introduction. I have a couple of questions, but let's open the floor to others first, rather than me abusing my position as chair. Helena, I know you needed to leave us at 2:30, so I wondered if there's anything that you wanted to pick up from your perspective first, given that I know you need to leave us in the next few minutes.
There's nothing major. I think it's just important that when victims are victims of hate crime, that if we have ASBRACs or any meetings which are focusing around really vulnerable victims, that the police, local police who are working in that area, do have the opportunity to attend those meetings, so we can get the full insight of what's actually happening in neighbourhoods. And I just feel, the police are stretched, but it just needs to be an important factor, because as partners looking at that case, we need the picture there to get the full effect and protect the victims. So yeah, that was just a point when I'm looking at cases in depthly and working with the hate crime officer. These are the areas that we struggle with, even though we work closely with the police and they support us. It's just areas where we could do with them, make sure they attend them essential meetings when it involves victims, really.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree. And partnership working is going to be integral to the new police and crime plan. We've got a whole section on partnership working, and we've had separate consultations with our criminal justice partners, so that not only do we rely on them, but they also rely on the police to be able to deliver the outcomes for our communities. And I do know the police are stretched, because I hear that everywhere, but still, where we're talking about vulnerable people, and this is one of the areas where actually we're only adequate on the peel inspection. So it is an area that we need to be focusing on. And I think what we need to do is get the evidence together to say, because often the chief constable will say to me, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that and we're doing that. And it's there's a lot of obfuscation, good word. And without the evidence and the facts and the examples, I struggle to counter what is generally a true picture. But in specifics, there are always outliers. So if you give me the evidence of the outliers, I can use that to counter some of the generalisations and provide the evidence that is needed to get that focus on the areas that are most important to you, our partners.
Thank you. So thank you for that, Alison.
So you can email me if you've got a specific instance. Yeah. You're really worried and someone's really vulnerable. Please email the office, because we're capturing stories all the time of vulnerability where we think the police have got it wrong, and we're using that. We send that to the police training school, and they incorporate that into their safeguarding training. So they try and learn those lessons, and that's genuinely the case. But obviously, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you will always have officers who have a bad day, didn't turn up on that day of the training, whatever it was. So we need to make sure that the training is informed by a lived experience.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks, Alison, and thanks, Helen, for the question. I think this session is about getting into the nitty-gritty of it and the focus. So it's good to have focused in on one particular area from Kirklees' perspective. Does anyone else want to come in on this? David, did you have any follow-up questions from your perspective within the council?
Yes, it was a wider discussion that I'd had with some of the colleagues, and I know it's not a statutory requirement and it's not a duty as such, but what are the moves, Alison, towards making misogyny reportable, and how are we recording incidents that are coming in now?
Well, clearly we've already just started as of the 1st of December. So I don't understand how all the details are going to work. What I do know is the government have not accepted that misogyny or indeed misandry are criminal offences. So we're not recording them as crimes. We are recording them. And so we've got an understanding and a picture of what victims are telling us about the way that they're treated, spoken to. And it might be part of a crime. It might be domestic abuse as a result of misandry, or domestic abuse as a result of misogyny. So it can be that it is that the crime is being committed, and that the aggravating feature is the gender of the victim. So we can definitely record that. But when you go to court, normally an aggravating feature under the hate crime legislation leads to a heavier sentence. Mm-hmm. So if someone's been assaulted as a result of their sexual orientation, for example, you can extend the prison sentence on that basis. You can't yet with misandry or misogyny, because the government have not included that in the legislation. We are still working hard to change the government's mind, and we will continue to do that until we win. And we will win, because there's lots of us, and we're all fighting the same battle.
The winning is important to me, but time it takes to win is also a matter of great concern, I think.
Yeah, but it's all our responsibilities, isn't it? Because voice, and with you, David, I'm too.
Let's keep piling the pressure on them. But yeah, it's the victims now that are the worry, because as we're seeing numbers rise, that distinction between reportable, recordable, and something that can actually lead to an increased sentence and that which can't appears more and more nonsensical to me. But
the good news is the process of recording is the evidence base that we're going to start to build to force the government to act, because without the evidence base, the government can continue to say, "Oh, it's all right, it's harmless, it's just it's just a bit of boys banter," because not that misandry doesn't exist, of course it does, but that's how the government has been describing it. And what we need is the evidence to show the real harm that this behaviour causes.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Benjamin, I can see you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in here?
Yeah, it's Ben, please. It comes up as Benjamin. I have to be Benjamin because it's my legal name. Just to say, I am a third voice as well. I'm the Diversity, Equality, Inclusion Team Manager at West Yorkshire Police. So, Alison, it's been a while since I've seen you, but hello, it's lovely to see your face.
Hello,
it's been since my Bernardo's days since I've seen you, Alison. But I just wanted to kind of reinforce what Alison was saying. We've had comms go out this week to all officers and all staff with regards to capturing this information, and there's a step-by-step guide talking people through how to record this information when it comes to particularly, and it talks through how to first log a hate incident, and then it talks through the options of then what type of hate crime that refers to, and gender is a specific one, so we can monitor that in force. And it's only by individual police forces. I know North Yorkshire do this as well. It's only by individual forces them being able to present that data to government that we can make a change, that we can then go on and get government to recognise misogyny as a hate crime. So it was I just wanted to add my third voice in there to say that.
And I'd love to get that guide. That would be brilliant.
I'm sure I can send you, Alison.
It is just about when I get asked that question, I then with some knowledge be able to say, oh, there's a step-by-step guide and it does this and this. So it's just for my illumination.
Yeah, leave it with me.
Thank you,
Ben. And I should have said at the start, I guess, that the West Yorkshire Police have, of course, signed our Kirklees Diversity Equals Innovation Charter, and are fantastic members of our network. So I think there is that connection in there, which is fantastic as well. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I'm going to just sort of see if any one of Lucy or Jessica or Zoe wanted to say anything at their perspectives. Lucy, did you want to add anything from Cummins' perspective?
Hi and hello, Alison. I don't think we've met before, so it is nice to speak to you. I did have a question, Hugh. It was sort of going off the topic of policing, but it was about something else, and I was just wanting to ask Alison about it. But
wait.
Well, I didn't want to move off the topic. If somebody else wanted to join in, I'd jump in before that.
Jump in, Lucy. It's your moment. Please do.
So, Alison, I've been really impressed by what you've been saying. I think I'm most impressed by how you breathe. How do you breathe when you're talking like that? No, I think it was this most recent news that I saw a headline of about people having the right of voters to elect racists and misogynists. And that was being brought up with the Standards Committee saying that they should be demonstrating anti-discriminatory attitudes. So I just wondered, what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. Well, we've elected a government that's racist, homophobic, sexist, idiotic and incompetent. And so clearly you'll be getting ministers et al. Saying that that's okay to do so because otherwise their whole existence is called into question. the democracy we live in means that the public, if enough of them are stupid enough to do so, as we've seen in the case of Boris Johnson, I'm a politician, so I can say what I like, by the way. The evidence is that some people don't really care about someone's politics, about their views. If it speaks to them and their views, they will vote for them. The difference is for the PCC is that we are a public authority in the same way that local authorities are, in the same way the NHS is. And if they then go on to promote hate rather than promote the Equality Act duty, they then can be held accountable through legislation, but also through employment tribunals, through challenges, complaints from members of the public. So there is a right of reply. There are processes to hold those people to account, but any idiot can get elected. You know, we've seen horses get elected, haven't we? Well, people, men in horse costumes. So unfortunately, one of the great things about democracy is that people get to have their say. And unfortunately, one of the great things about democracy is people get to have their say. Hence, we're out of Europe. So it was ever thus.
Yeah, thanks.
Was that what you were looking for, Lucy, or was there was there another element to your question?
Well, no, I'm just amazed in this day and age that someone thinks that they can say that. You know, I think, you know, if you could wipe the slate clean and go to an election, you would hope that the candidate selection weeded that kind of attitude out. But you know,
I mean, it's a process, Lucy. But each obviously, some people are independents, some people are in political parties, and each political party has a process for vetting candidates. And in fact, for a PCC, we are literally vetted by the police. So all my bank accounts, my family members, as well as obviously any criminal record, which I don't have one because I wouldn't be here if I did, but also my associates. So it's a very, very substantial process. But my views, unfortunately, they can't vet my views. And in some ways, I'm sure my views will be extreme to some people, just like some other PCCs. But the great news is that there are processes, as I've just described. But also, if you look to North Yorkshire, you know, Phil Allott made his strange views known, and he was gone within, what was it, 2 weeks? So maybe the democracy we've got is there or thereabouts. You know, it's not perfect, we know that, but it can work if the majority of sensible people stand up and say, no, this is not okay, and demand that the person that they've elected, you know, steps back because of their views. But unfortunately, we live in a world where idiots get elected, racists get elected, and Boris Johnsons get elected.
Okay.
You do.
Thank you.
You do. Jessica, I can see your hand's up. Do you want to come in now? And thanks, Lucy, for your questions.
Oh, I'm on mute. Just kind of a question about the Bradford Hate Crime Alliance, I suppose, and whether or not Kirklees can have something similar. And I worked a lot with Charles in Bradford, who was very good. And I was just wondering, from your experience, Alison, if it's something worthwhile that Kirklees should have, on the basis of, from a personal experience relatively recently, I reported a hate crime incident, not to West Yorkshire Police, thankfully, it was to a different police force. And it took me from August until last week for the police to log it as a hate crime incident. They were dragging their heels over and saying it wasn't hate crime and that the victim needed to perceive it as a hate crime. To which I was emailing and saying, as the victim, I perceive it as a hate crime. Please log it as such. And they just were putting their heads in the sand, didn't want to deal with it for whatever reason. So would a separate organisation or an advocate like Bradford Hate Crime Alliance, would that encourage more people to report hate crime? Because I know from other roles I've had that people would go, I'm not going to the police because they don't care, they don't listen.
Yeah.
But I feel personally, if I had Charles fight in my corner or someone like Charles, then I know I could leave it to him and he would go and fight for me and do it. Would that be something that would be, you know, that maybe Kirklees would need, or would people from minority backgrounds feel more comfortable approaching a third party rather than going to the police directly?
So obviously everyone's different, and for some people, having I've got the hate crime strategy from Bradford. That's what I went down for to look for, and it is a thing of beauty, and obviously it's lots and lots of work has gone into it. So some people will be encouraged by the likes of the lovely Charles and the Hate Crime Alliance to report. But actually, you said something really telling. It's taken, 4 months for a hate crime that you experienced to be recorded. That is shocking. That is absolutely shocking. And if I was a victim, that would be 2 fingers up to that force and 2 fingers up to ever reporting anything ever again. That is the reason why people don't report hate crimes. It's not because they've not got a champion in their community to support them. It's that the reason is the confidence and the trust in policing to respond appropriately. That's why women don't report rape. That's why domestic abuse goes on and on and on. And that's why hate crime is not treated appropriately and dealt with in the way that it should be. And so we've got to deal with policing. And there are lots and lots of different ways for you to get, hold them to account for that really poor practice. If you there's a complaints process you can go through to complain about the length of time it took, and ask that then the learning from that process be embedded in their training, so you can ask for that. And if you're not satisfied about the way that they respond, you can then go to the PCC. I don't know which area it is, I don't know what your PCC is like, but they've got a statutory function of review of all complaints, and they can uphold your complaint even if the force don't agree, and then the force have got to uphold it. You can go to the IOPC. That's another area that you can go to, because it's the response of police that is the single most important way that trust and confidence will be rebuilt back with all our communities. And unfortunately, some police have yet to realise that, or maybe they've realised and they just don't care. So yes, it's great to have all those supporters. I think we've got various national bodies that people can call upon in any event. Haven't we got Stop Hate UK, which is a national charity? There are lots and lots of hate crime reporting centres up and down the country. So there are lots of different vehicles for getting that advocacy for individuals. Lots of individual organisations, for example, non-binary leads, trans leads. I've got a lot to do with. I've had a lot to do with over the years. But the issue is whether or not whoever you've got in your corner, will the police respond effectively? And if they don't, you'll never report again. So well done for persevering, but hold them to account, because that's bang out of order.
So how would we then, if it was to happen in Kirklees, how do we get? So for me, it's not my job to report hate crime, but because it's my job, I will fight these things. But how do we get a normal citizen of Kirklees who's gone through that experience to get the trust back? How can we as organisations help get that trust back then?
So in relation to West Yorkshire, as I say, everything gets recorded. So there's been so much, because what happened is, when I was chair of the police and crime panel, feels like 100 years ago, but I only stopped in 2019. So back in about 2015-16, West Yorkshire were one of the worst forces in the country for recording crime. It's called CDI, Crime Data Integrity, and we were one of the worst forces in the country, at the bottom of the league. But it was discovered that randomly all forces were behaving really badly, and in order to artificially suppress the real situation with regard to crime in their areas, they were choosing not to record crime, or they were recording crime wrongly. So a rape would be a sexual assault, a minor sexual assault like that, or they wouldn't get lots of rapes weren't even getting recorded. This is how it all came out. It was all about rape. Rape was not getting recorded, even though it was being reported. And so there was a whole scale piece of work done with West Yorkshire Police, and the panel were holding them to account for this. We had multiple meetings with the Chief Constable, who was Dee Collins then. And we got from there to being the best in the country, because the training, the oversight, the systematic approach now to recording is so embedded. And so the chances that things won't get recorded are much lower in West Yorkshire than in other forces. I'm not saying it's impossible, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, but the chances of it not being recorded are much, much lower than other forces. So that's not the issue. The issue is, how does the police officer in front of you then deal with it? Because if they're not compassionate, sensitive, if they haven't had the right inclusion and diversity training. If they're a misogynist and pretending not to be, and we know that those people do exist in police forces, unfortunately, you're not likely to get the right response. And that's where we have to keep putting the pressure back. That's where we have to say our standard for behaviour, for conduct of policing is it's very high or very low, depending on your perspective. You know, we've just sacked a police constable for stealing Jaffa cakes. We've had lots of kickback. I say we, I'm not West Yorkshire Police, but I'm talking about West Yorkshire as a whole. We've had lots of people emailing the police saying this is disgraceful, it was only Jaffa cakes. But our standard is so high, and we've got to be able to trust the people who are out there talking to the community. And if that trust doesn't exist, then how can you build that legitimacy, that policing by consent? So we go forward one police officer at a time. We look at the training. So there's this thing called PEQF at the moment, which is the new training protocol that all policing have got to go through. I've just written to the College of Policing saying, have you done an equality impact assessment? You've been doing this for 18 months. Is it working for everybody? Let's do an equality impact assessment. I've written to our Chief Constable. I've written to all the PCCs in the country, and I've sent them all a equality impact assessment that they might want to use. And I've said, you need to do an equality impact assessment on this PEQF or get your forces to do it, because we need to know now, is it culturally competent? Who is delivering this training? Are they diverse? So we're putting that challenge out all the time. But we're at the start of a very, very, very long battle, and we will be victorious because we've got no choice, have we?
Cool, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jessica, and thank you, Alison, for that.
Could I just come in here as a response to Jessica as well? That there are several places that you can feed into within, and I know it's, you know, if you've not been dealt with appropriately by a police force, you're probably not going to then want to report it again to another police force about how your treatment's been. But you can report directly into our professional standards directorate in terms of complaining about the police. But there are also, and I can get you the details, but I know West Yorkshire Police, we run an LGBT hate crime scrutiny panel that is open to members of the public to join. So you can sit on that panel, and that is where LGBT specific hate crimes or incidents are then scrutinised by members of the public, and we can feed back on overall police, you know, the overall how we've done as a police service, looking at individual officers, whether or not those officers need kind of like management advice, whether they need praise for those, what they've done in that specific situation, what could be done better. So that is something that you could possibly feed into as well. And I know your experience hasn't meant that you might want to be far removed from that, but certainly somebody that's sat in Kirklees, somebody that is part of the community that West Yorkshire Police serves, maybe that's something that you might want to be a part of in the future. But David, I think you've got my contact details. Jessica, if you wanted my details, I'm happy for those to be shared, and I can put you in touch with how to be involved in that.
Magic. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. Ben, just while you're on, just a follow up to something that Alison said, I guess, as well, is in terms of, because I think Alison rightly commented on sort of training and ensuring that it's appropriate for all. I think your exact words were one officer at a time, weren't they, Alison, in terms of ensuring that every officer is culturally aware, etc.
There are a lot of coppers in West Yorkshire. I have to say, I've met lots of them. There are a lot of really good police officers and staff in West Yorkshire. It's the minority that's always the problem.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, and I should say I've met some as well, Alison. And my experience has generally been fantastic. But Ben, did you have any reflections on that as well? Because I mean, are you involved in that in your role with them?
Yeah, well, I sit much more of a strategic point of view in terms of the work that I do. We do have a specific diversity, equality, and inclusion trainer that I work with quite often. I've been in a couple of meetings with him today, actually. But certainly, what Alison was saying there around making sure that police forces, when we're looking at the PEQF and the training that we offer, that it is relevant, that it's beneficial, that we're constantly reviewing. As you know, I preach into the converted, but this journey of DEI altogether, it's a journey. We've got to be constantly evolving. We can't just decide to do something in 2017 and then stick with it for the next 15 years. It quickly becomes irrelevant. Does a lot of the training. So part of I can give you a bit of an insight into West Yorkshire Police, I suppose. Part of starting to address kind of like cultural competency and cultural awareness amongst our officers, we're starting with a foundation pack of training. So we've made unconscious bias training, for instance, mandatory for everybody. That's not just officers, that's staff. So there's 10,753, if my memory serves me right, of last week, officers and staff across the organisation. So they've all been trained around unconscious bias. Being really mindful that government, the Home Office withdrew their unconscious bias training. In fact, the very week that we launched ours. So we have to.
They've got pretty patellar, or ugly as I like to call.
Yeah. But that's not, unconscious bias training does work. It works when unconscious bias is not taught as something that can be eliminated. Unconscious bias is a natural human processing. So it exists in every single person. You can't eliminate or get rid of it at all. But if we can teach that this is how we process information. So when you think about the 11 million pieces of unconscious information that go through your head versus the 40 pieces of conscious information that process at the same time, there's a massive imbalance. I'm going into the training content there. I apologise. That's not what I wanted to do. But that's part of the foundation training that we're wanting to teach the officers. Moving on from that, we want to start to look at how can we build upon that? This is building kind of foundation of being aware how people process information. What are our priorities next around becoming culturally aware or culturally conscious? And building on from the really sad events that happened, that started, they've been going on for centuries, but certainly that were highlighted with the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. Do we need to look at Black experience, Black history in West Yorkshire? But who do we get to do that? Because in all honesty, my training team look like me, do an awful lot of them. Am I in the perfect position as a white cisgendered man to deliver training on Black history in West Yorkshire? I don't think I am. So we're looking at external organisations to come in. There's been an acknowledgement that we might not have the experience. We might have the experience of trainers, and certainly I can give my perception of Black experience and Black history and history of those from ethnic minority backgrounds, for instance, but I've not lived that experience, so we might need to bring that in. So that's what I've been looking at on behalf of our learning and development side of things. There's been no decisions made yet around where we move to next, but we've looked at loads of different options, including it is going to be mandatory training again for the 10,500 staff, but do we do that over a series of 12 months, incorporating different identities within that? So if we ran it over 12 months, we could include LGBT History Month within that, and the experience that LGBT persons of colour have within our communities. We can then look in December maybe to tie in International Day of People with Disabilities, for instance. March, we can look at women's experience. So we can tie in all these intersectionalities. I should probably say I'm really passionate about this training. I really want it to be really beneficial, but it's just to kind of give you a little bit more kind of background as what we are looking at as a force. And I certainly want all my officers to be more aware of people and of different communities, because we do have to have an acceptance, I suppose, that there is a huge misrepresentation in terms of modern policing. This is up and down the country in terms of non-white faces in policing, of hetero and cis normative kind of backgrounds within policing, and that's just to name but two of, and that's just looking at protected characteristics. We then can start to look at socioeconomic backgrounds and things, but there is an acceptance that we're not fairly represented, so we need to get in that experience. And those that people that we have that might have different experiences or a bit of a different background, I suppose, and socioeconomic background, we want to make sure that we capture those voices as well that are already in policing, that we learn from those people's experiences as well. So I will stop because I'll talk about it forever. I'll take over your entire meeting, but yeah, that's just a bit of a background to what that's ongoing at the moment. So that's been the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. And I mean, we're drawing to the end of the meeting, I think, but really good to get your your perspective as well, and I think it only adds to the to the picture that Alison has already set out. I can't see any more hands up or any more questions, and I know Zoe's had to leave us from the football club. So I just wondered, David, do you have any last questions from the council's perspective for Alison, or observations before we close?
Just on the development of using leisure facilities and some of our larger libraries for a more supportive hate crime reporting environment. It's something that, again, it's an idea that a couple of colleagues, Jessica included, have brought in from work with Bradford Hate Crime Initiative. It would involve turning, I think we've got 23 contact centres now where staff have got some training, and we want to be turning at least 10 of those over to a more in-depth service with greater support. Would that be an initiative that you would see catching attention wider than Kirklees, Alison? I think it's something we could do on a regional basis.
I mean, we could definitely have the conversation. I mean, I always like you to put your money where your mouth is. So if you think something can work, make it work, evidence that it works, and then everybody else has to follow in behind, don't they? The problem with trying to do it West Yorkshire wide first is if you've got someone who balks at the idea or who's a bit slower than you are, that prevents you getting on with it. So I think getting on with it, getting the evidence base, and then using that as the platform to get everybody else on board and follow your model, by the way, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and interfere, then I personally think that's the best way forward. Because
Susan, who couldn't join us this afternoon, this has been her thing for the past 6 years, trying to get interest in it.
Well, it's taken 6 years for one person to do it. How long will it take for, all 5 West Yorkshire?
Exactly. I mean, she's just hoping to slipstream some of Bradford's work and sort of utilise that or redesign it for us. So hopefully we can keep a watching brief on this and see how that develops.
Yeah. And actually, if you did that, then I'd like to come to your first meeting, because I've got an idea whether the groups agree, and I've got to go in 4 minutes, but it's just so you know that I'm hoping to get community impact assessments, and I know we've had community impact assessments in the past, but I want to work with the Gypsy Traveller community, Roma community, LGB community, and trans and non-binary communities. I want to work with them to talk about, as a community, what the impact of hate crime is on a community level, not just individually. And then I want to locate all those impact statements, community impact statements, in the courts, so that when hate crime comes before a magistrate or a judge, they have access not just to the individual before them talking about the impact. And often the individual doesn't come because obviously we all know that they don't want to be involved for lots of reasons. But then that community impact assessment, impact statement is there to help the person sentencing the suspect. It helps them to understand the impact of that hate crime, and hopefully it's a bit of restorative justice too. It helps the person in the dock also understand the impact, not just on that individual but also on the whole community. So that's definitely something that I'd like to progress. Need 5 minutes, that's what I need.
In the last 2 minutes, that would be brilliant to get that before the sentencer, and to be able to use that as part of the sentencing process. I think it's a major leap forward.
If someone's got some wherewithal and would like to take it out, I'll be there at every meeting and really helping. But it's and I can get the courts to pick it up, because I chair the local criminal justice board. So that bit will be the easy bit. It's getting all those communities together and having those those voices.
And it sounds to me,
giving power back.
It sounds to me that, and David, that the network that you're talking about, David, could be the exact perfect way to facilitate something like that, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So
I would hope so. I can feed this back to Susan.
Yeah. That'd be good. So I've got a minute before my next meeting starts with police, so I have to go. But it's been really, really helpful and interesting, and hopefully it's been helpful and interesting for you too.
It has, absolutely, Alison, and thank you in the last 10 seconds that we have with you. All that remains for me to say is thank you to everyone, to the council and David for inviting you and hosting us, and to everyone for joining. And as I say, we have recorded this, so hopefully everyone's happy for us to share the discussion with our
yeah, just blot out the bit where I talk about police murdering black people, because I'm sure they won't like that.
No, I thought it'd be the bit where you talked about Boris Johnson.
I'll say that to his bloody face.
Okay, good. Well, we might get a chance to do that soon. But thank you, Alison, and thank you, everyone.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.
Bye, David. Thanks, Ben.